I can do it, but I can do it. It normally takes about 20 minutes. All right, so there's a couple of ingredients. Let's try this out.
Go.
In layman's terms, right? So you know what a hash is? A hash? Anyone? People know what hashes are, right? I know this side know because they've been on mining for years. This side don't know, do they? No. So there's a couple of ingredients that you have to know about. These are actually really old in terms of mathematical proofs. You've got to look up Merkle trees. Ralph Merkle wrote the paper in 1976, I think it was, mid to early 70s. And you've got to know about hashes. Hashes are one-way mathematical functions. First one was called MD3 or something like that. Bitcoin uses a hash called char256. What a hash is a one-way mathematical cryptographic function, which means I put an input in, I get an output out, and the output is always guaranteed to be the same if I put the same input in. If I take the complete works of Shakespeare, and why wouldn't I, because I'm a Brit, I take the complete works of Shakespeare, I put it through char256, I'm going to get an output of 256 alphanumerics that will always be the same, unless if I change one comma, add a space, the whole output changes such that I couldn't tell what was changed from the input. So there's two really key characteristics of this particular function, char256, that I need to have. One is it's called deterministic. That determinism was really, I take an input, I get the same output. And the second thing is it has to be collision resistant. Because what I've just described, I can take an infinite number of inputs and I have a finite number of outputs. The finite number is 256 factorial, okay, which is a big number, but it's still a finite number. So collision resistant means, is there a chance that two inputs can have the same output? And the answer is yes, but you have to have a degree of confidence that the chance of that happen, that collision is going to be rare. Understanding and rare in this context means an extinction level event happening in the next 30 seconds. We all feel comfortable that that's not going to happen in 30 seconds. So we feel pretty good about it. So we take that ingredient, this char256, and we form a transaction through it. And then for the mining process to work, what we say is, well, producing a hashes, by the way, are at least 30 years old. They were born of hardware, RAM compute, moving when we first had to move information out of the RAM memory, random access memory, into ROM memory, read-only memory on a hard disk. That process was using hashes. Anyway, digression. I said, how long have I been so far?
You got 9 minutes. Go.
I'm trying. I'm speaking quickly. It's very. You need at least 5 different mathematical kind of to get it all. But I'm going to try you with 3 of them, and we'll see where we end up. So you take. So what's this proof of work thing all about? Well, producing hashes is actually not that hard anymore. It's not that challenging with today's compute. So what we ask you to do is we ask you to compute a hash where the first leading positions in this hash in 256 are 0. Made it a bit harder for you now, because remember it's one way. So if it's a one-way function, if I've got a static input, which is the transaction that you want to verify, let's say it's one transaction, and that one transaction, if I play it through, we've already determined is deterministic, it's going to produce the same output each time. But I want something which has that transaction with 8 leading zeros. Well, to do that, I've got to add something to it, and I add a random number. It's called a nonce. I add a random number to it, and I've got to keep changing that random number as many times as I can until one combination of this transaction plus a random number generates something with 8 leading zeros. Soon as I get it, I shout it out to the audience that I got the answer. And it's very easy to go from the answer to the input than the other way around. So we call that brute force, calculating, guessing. It's like me saying to the room, hey, everyone, can you tell me what the calculation of the square root of 125 is? I pause for a second because some of you tried it. This is called System 1, System 2 thinking in the brain. The human brain is the laziest organ in the body. So some of you tried it and you thought, it's 11, it's 12, no, I give up. That's what your brain did. But if I tell you that it's 11.17, some of you might actually, if you're good mathematicians, work it out. That will work out to about 124.997 decimal places. All right, so it's easier to go one way than the other, and that's to a computer, that's the same thing. So if I give you the hash, you can really calculate the answer quickly. So what happens in this proof of work, roughly speaking, taking a block of transactions, putting them in a hash, then trying to guess the hash of that block that produces the leading 8 zeros should take a very, very fast computer. An ASIC card has been specially designed just to calculate that bit of math about 10 minutes. And in spending that 10 minutes, you're burning energy. You're basically creating a nice warm room for yourself because your machine's working really hard. And on average, it's about 10 minutes. And what the protocol does is it self-adjusts every 600 minutes, about 2 weeks. It self-adjusts. If it finds that computes on that it solved the problem on average quicker than 10 minutes, it will increase the difficulty. It means it asks everyone to solve it with 9 leading zeros. To make it harder, and so forth. So in other words, if the power of the computing that people are applying to it becomes more and more powerful, then it self-adjusts. And in that process, it's making people spend energy in order to solve the problem is one of the underpinning of why proof of work is all about. And the theory behind it is because, and this is the last piece of the puzzle, I promise, the theory behind it is that if your chances of winning a single CPU, of being the first to guess the prize, is about once every year and a half. So what do we do when we play the lottery and we want to increase our odds? We buy more lines, we buy more rows, spend more money, or we join office pools. And that's really what the same thing is true for Bitcoin. So you either buy more server space with more servers to calculate it. And by the way, a mining rig is like 256 of these processors in a row and 10 deep. So one machine already has a lot of processors. Then you join a pool, which basically makes the chances even in that, your chance to win once every year and a half. So don't go home tonight and download the software with your little machine and expect to win anytime soon.
I just want to add
it's
one point.
It's that simple, folks.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was about 5 minutes. Sorry.
Good job. I just want to add one point is that the value of your brand new hardware is only valuable for a couple of months, and then you're going to have to cycle it out because you don't get any more Bitcoin, so, which is one of the reasons why it's hard to, people always comment on how many rigs there are in China but you're not going to maintain the lead for a very long period of time unless you're cycling out your machines very quickly.
I tried it when I first got into Bitcoin, and I took an old machine, an old Mac, and I put it under my stairs. And sadly, I didn't win anything. My machine didn't win, and it wasn't surprising. When he did the math, it wasn't surprising. And what people nowadays, you can actually rent server space. You don't have to go and buy it yourself. You can actually lease it for a month if you want. So there's lots of applications out there for doing that. So yeah, don't literally go home and do it. You can go online. I forget the services. You can buy, you can rent 1,000 mining rigs, lease them for a month, and see how you do.